This is today's business leaders. Actionable advice from real-world professionals. And now here's your host, Gabe Arnold.
All right, today I'm very excited to have Nick Loper on the show. He has a lot of different projects, which he'll probably share some of them with us today, but two big ones that I've kind of found him through are virtual assistant.com, and then he also has Side Hustle Nation, and really active communities around both of those. But today, Nick, I just wanted to have you come on and kind of share your story with us. And as I shared before we got started here, these are just kind of informal conversations with other entrepreneurs about how they got started and what they're learning and what they're doing. And then we typically have folks back afterward to talk about more wherever it kind of goes. So to start with, tell me, like, the first time that you realized that you were an entrepreneur, and, you know, share what that was like, if you can remember back then, and then kind of do the whatever kind of brief version or however you want to catch us up to where you are today, just some of the highlights.
That's actually a good question. I don't know if anybody's ever forced me to think about that before, but Gabe, thank you for having me on. I should mention that Gabe's one of the most popular guests on the Side Hustle show. So appreciate you, returning the favor, and hopefully I can, deliver something similar to what you brought. When was I first an entrepreneur? One thing that stands out of when it kind of hit me was I took this internship in college. They called it an internship. It was with one of these like college painting companies. I don't know if they had these at your school, or in your neighborhood, in your area, right?
Yeah.
There's like probably three major ones in the States. It's like Student Painters, College Pro, and College Works.
Yeah.
And so I was with College Works. And it's like, okay, we're going to assign you a territory, a neighborhood, a zip code, and it's your job to go out and paint as many houses as you can over the course of the summer.
Nice.
And we're going to show you how to estimate a job. We're going to, set up an account for you at the paint store, so you're not like fronting the expense for it. And we'll teach you how to paint too, like just minor details.
Minor details,
and
that's right.
it's a good business for college students because it wasn't. It's not rocket science, but it was a really stressful time because I had this tendency to like underbid jobs because I was afraid of like not getting enough work and, having, my crews like just sitting around. And so I found myself like painting a lot more than I probably should have. But at the same time, like that, it was really rewarding to stand back at the end of the week and say, hey, look, we transformed this house. And then to stand back at the end of the summer and say, hey, we did that, 25 times. And, we, had a $60,000 business, $70,000 business, I think, by year two, part-time as a college student. I was like, that's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
What hit me, or what I remember, was at the end of the summer on the company's like internal blog, they posted this article and it's like, if you're reading this, we probably have ruined your life. And I was like, okay, I'll click on that one. And it was this whole story of like, if you've made it this far, you're not going to be able to work for somebody else because you've had now this taste of working for profits and not wages. You've had this taste of being the boss. You've had this taste of really kind of controlling your own destiny and steering your own ship. And it was pretty true. I've had a couple different jobs, maybe 3 different jobs since then, but it's always kind of been at the back of my mind. And I really only had one real job, a couple other like internships and stuff. It was like, hey, you ruined my life, and now I can't go work for somebody else anymore.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And yeah, that's definitely what happens. When I was younger, like I was working for my grandpa at his company, and kind of similar thing happened. Like when you work construction or something similar, like, oh, I could just go do that on my own, and you try it out and you learn a lot, and you may not make any money early on, but you kind of figure out the whole business process, and then you're right, you're completely ruined for life. Because I've worked 2 jobs for a total of 18 months, like almost 15 years ago, and that's all I could hack. So so that's kind of where you started out with figuring out, oh, this is how business works, and I can control the profit or the margin, and I can kind of form my own future or my own destiny. Now that you were kind of ruined, that was an interesting blog post. I don't know if I would post that as a company, but that's awesome. But now that once that happened, where did that guide you? Like, what are some of the highlights of things you learned over the years, and like what other kind of entrepreneurial successes and failures have you had?
Well, plenty of failures. A couple of things that I was just thinking about this afternoon. Like I could write a post. Like I've probably had like 5 good ideas like my whole life.
Yeah.
And it's just like a matter of executing on those, and like, oh, those turned out to like be really important looking back. So after school, I did the corporate thing. I worked for Ford straight out of school for 3 years. While I was doing that, I was building my original side hustle, which was a footwear comparison shopping site called shoesniper.com. Originally, it was called shoesrus.net. One of those, 5-minute domain decisions where you're like, I really probably should have spent a little more time thinking about this.
Yeah.
But my theory was, this was back when comparison shopping was big, so you had competitors like PriceGrabber and NextTag and shopping.com. My theory was if people are searching for shoes, I'm going to have shoes in the URL. That was like my only criteria. It's going to have a higher click-through rate because people are going to be like, hey, well, this must be the go-to place for shoes. Yeah. And over the course of several years, we really made it that because of we're able to write a tighter algorithm than, the same company that has to write algorithms to compare digital cameras and jeans and all this other stuff.
Gotcha.
So there was that piece of it. And then we were able to work with the retailers and negotiate like exclusive coupons and, special offers for visitors and bake that into the price. So it ended up being, I think the stat, we did some audit, of course. It's like, okay, we beat the, Google Shopping. We beat like the main comparison engines like 3 times out of 4 on price,
Wow.
because of these relationships. So it ended up being kind of a fun little side hustle turned into a main focus for a lot of years. And then on the side from that, like while I was running the shoe business full time, started a bunch of other side projects, and most of them failed horribly. But the 2 that you mentioned, the 2 that are actually still around, are the virtual assistant.com and the sidehustlenation.com and the Side Hustle Show podcast.
Awesome. And with the shoe website, did you end up selling that or getting out of it, or just did it become irrelevant at some point, or what happened with that one?
So the shoe site, unfortunately, like with the value of hindsight, right? Like should have sold it, years before. Like kept holding on, thinking that it was gonna get better. What happened? So that site played in the margin between the cost of traffic and the what the traffic was worth in terms of affiliate commission, and essentially that's what all online businesses, kind of rely on or kind of play in. It's like, well, what are your revenues and what are your costs?
Right.
But in the case of this thing, like the costs were dramatically higher in 2014 than they were in 2005, 2006. And at the same time, companies were cutting their commissions, even kind of like their negotiated top performer commissions, kind of slowly creeping down. And so there were some months where my, virtual assistant was earning more than me. And I was like, we'd really tried to 80-20 the crap out of this thing. And like, how can we get it back to the point of, sustainably profitable? But
didn't happen.
It just wasn't happening. It was, at its peak, like during holiday times, it was like a 20 grand a month, 30 grand a month business. And, of course, in hindsight, man, that would have been a nice multiple to sell out, during those years.
Yeah.
But of course, it always comes the question too, because people have asked about buying the VA site. It's like the cash flow is nice. Like, what are you going to do without it? It's kind of like you got to have that next thing. What are you going to do with the money?
Yeah, that's a great point. There's kind of 2 mindsets that I've seen because we work with a lot of startups and established businesses, and I'm sure you've had hundreds of conversations about this too. Of, are you building to exit and it's just kind of a quick hit, or are you just building it to live out whatever cash flow is there? Because I have a super small little business that does about like $3,000 to $5,000 a month, depending if I pay attention to it or not, is the main thing. But I had somebody come and offer me what was a totally fair buyout about 18 months ago, and I was like, well, that's a fair evaluation. There's no question there, but
yeah,
I can string it along for another 3 or 4 years and dramatically beat that number. So I definitely understand how that goes. And you mentioned something I think very accurate for all entrepreneurs and just in any kind of business ventures. You mentioned like you've had a lot of bad ideas that didn't go anywhere, and I think I have dozens every month. When do you kill an idea like because it hasn't gotten off the ground? And what was the criteria for the comparison site when you were just like, I'm going to kill this because it's not worth doing anymore? How do you evaluate that? Because I think entrepreneurs successful ones by nature are persistent and want to keep going and want to keep trying, keep working, but that's not necessarily the right answer sometimes.
Yeah, I pull the plug when you come to dread the work and not seeing results from it. Like that combination is like the signal for me that it's like, okay, this is time to be done with this. And it was tough because like I've been working on that shoe site for years. Like and especially in the early days, I thought like this could be my thing. Like I could just do this. Mm-hmm. And, had it pretty well systemized and delegated and, had all these ads running and like had built systems. Like it was a legit thing. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it wasn't working the same way that it always had. And you're like, well, what's going on here? So, and then you just like, you keep putting in the same amount of effort for diminishing returns. And it's like, okay, this just doesn't make sense. You kind of see where it's going despite your best efforts to turn it around. Like, okay, this is just, it's over with. Like I started dozens of other crappy little sites that really had no reason to exist. Like I started a wine related site because we kind of live like in wine country in California. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know anything about wine. I don't care anything about wine. And so it was just this regurgitated like Me Too content, like, oh, please click on my affiliate link. It was just ridiculous. Like there was no reason for it to exist. And so that was one that I pulled the plug on. There was another one. I started like a handbag and luggage site because a lot of the advertisers that I was working with already sold those products. And so I already had those relationships, but I didn't do enough diligence beforehand to say, okay, right out of the gate, the margins are lower on these products. And at the same time, the breadth of retailers selling them is like way wider. And so you'd have to churn through so much data to pull out like the 1% of their catalog that's actually relevant to this site. And it's just like, huge processing power. And so that one was the one that that had to, pull the plug on. Just all sorts of crap where it's like, oh, it worked in one niche. Let's try and pivot it to another. And sometimes, sometimes it works. Sometimes that's actually how the idea for the VA site came to be. I was working on that wine site. And this is why like no project is ever really like totally a failure, right? So I was working on this wine site. I came across this other site. It was like Wine Club Reviews or something. And it was just like, knowing what we know, it was like, this is just a blatant affiliate site. Like these are guessing these are like totally fake reviews. Like you put the company that pays you the most commission at the top. Like, okay, but at the same time, like how could I, like, this is a cool model. Like obviously this guy ranks really well for these keywords. Like he's printing money. Mm-hmm. Like how could I pivot this to another niche, another vertical? And that's where the idea for like the review site for the virtual assistant services came up, where it's like, okay, because that was something I was going through, in my life anyways. Like, which of these companies are legit? There's no Yelp for these companies yet. And so all right, well, let's try and build it.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea. And the point, like you said, as long as you're learning something or pivoting into something more successful, then it's never a failure. As long as you had fun. And that's good criteria. I guess I've never thought about just those two key pieces as, do you dread it? And is it not going the right direction? Because that's definitely fun. There's certain things that I've worked on for many years that are fun and have never gone anywhere. And I still had fun doing them. And that doesn't like deplete my energy or motivation. But yeah, when those two things are combined, when it's going the wrong way and you start to hate it, then it's probably time to wrap it up. Yeah. For you, like when you've closed something down or like killed a bad idea, do you see immediate impact positively other places, or is it just kind of like a weight off your mind and you just stop doing it and it's better than hating it every day?
Yeah, it is. There's a kind of like that emotional and mental burden that gets lifted. And it was the same thing, quitting my job. It was like, it took some, there was some inertia to overcome to say like, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to cut my own paycheck? Am I allowed to like, is this thing actually going to work, or is it going to like all come crashing down around me? And I was out to dinner with my boss. It still took a couple of beers to get up the nerve to like lay the news on him and say, look, I'm out of here, man.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when shutting down a project, especially one you've worked on for a long time. It's like, is this allowed? What's next? And maybe you have to have a clear vision of where that extra time is going to go. And thankfully at that time, so this was kind of like summer, fall of 2014. So by that time, the Side Hustle Nation stuff had kind of grown to the point where it was, there were signs of life. There were like little, tree sprigs like sprouting out. And so like, okay, maybe with a little extra attention, like this could be my main thing, because that's really what I wanted to spend my energy and attention on, because it was more fun, having conversations like these and like doing little side hustle experiments and all sorts of stuff. That was really kind of had a clear picture of what I would do and what I could probably do to grow it.
Yeah. Very cool. One thing that I've always been curious about, and you probably have enough conversations or data about to give a wise answer, is I have a lot of people ask me this question, and I actually just tell them to go to Side Hustle Nation because there's probably more information there. But how do you build, like, what was the criteria for you of quitting your job to step over? And then what kind of advice or recommendations have you given over the years now that you've done so much with Side Hustle Nation? Like, for me, I probably did it the most foolish way. I've started my business with no money and no job. But it worked out, and it was hard in the beginning. But have you ever kind of built a framework or thought through, like, the advice that you give and also compared to what you did when you decided to quit your job and be an entrepreneur full time? Yeah,
there's a couple different frameworks, or maybe 3 different frameworks. The first is like yours. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the type of person who, I jump off the cliff and I build my parachute on the way down. Like, I'll figure it out. I got to burn the ships. Like, if my back isn't against the wall, like, I'm not motivated, That sounds terrifying to me, but it works. It works for some people.
Yeah.
The other, so the other framework to think of is like your monthly expenses and, just whatever that total number is, and trying to figure out, okay, do I have a revenue history? Do I have a track record of covering those? I think in my case, I wanted to see it for 6 or 12 months. I don't know that the shoe business had like fully replaced my salary at that time, but as long as you're living below your means, your salary is largely irrelevant. It's like, well, what does it cost you to, support your family, basically, is kind of the more pertinent number in the near term. And then you say, hey, with an extra 40, 50, 60 hours a week, like, I'm pretty confident I could, really replace my salary and then some. The third framework that might be interesting for people just starting out, I call it the side hustle snowball. And that's where you're taking your monthly expenses, but really itemizing them out in like a really granular level, like saying, okay, I got $16 a month for my gym membership. I got, $60, maybe a little bit less, or my car insurance. I spend, $3.50 on Dollar Shave Club, just like breaking it down, like what do you spend your money on? And then trying to find income streams to erase those. Like, how can I just, itemize out these expenses, cross them off the list? Is that, a freelancing gig? Is that even like a dividend stock, where, okay, I own enough AT&T where I can, my cell phone bill is free, basically. It's like, it's a mental thing to like kind of erase these little expenses. And that's another way to kind of frame it. And you work your way up to the bigger expenses, like in our case now it's preschool and the rent are the 2 biggest line items.
Yeah. That's a great way of looking at it too. And I think it reminds me of like in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think one of the lines in there, or I've heard it other places, is, starting to think like, how can I afford something? And instead of saying I can't afford that. And that's a really simple way to break it down into really small increments. And that's how I look at things when I sell them. So that's an interesting approach. I think that's an almost simpler way of transitioning than thinking, oh, I need to hit X $1,000 a month for all my expenses.
It can be overwhelming. Be pretty daunting.
Yeah. And I think especially for people transitioning out of a job into something, I think that sales is the part that you haven't figured out. Maybe you don't know how to drive traffic and generate, revenue, or you don't know how to have the conversations and do the sales. And so warming yourself up to that or getting into that slowly is probably a good transition. So with how many episodes have you done on the Side Hustle show?
260 something.
Wow. So you're 100 times farther than I am. I think this is like, I have to, when this comes out, I'll have to look, but I think we're in the 20s. But over all those interviews and everything, what were a couple aha moments for you where like, wow, you know, you've done the side hustle, you're an entrepreneur, everything like that. You have all your own experience over all those shows. What are a few things that have stood out that you were like, wow, that was super valuable for me personally?
Some of my favorite tidbits. Like first thing, kind of on a high level, what seems to separate the guests that have the most success, and then, you know, the people who are kind of like on the sidelines saying like, Nick, I need an idea, I want to get started and stuff like that, is kind of like this willingness to try something out, not knowing the outcome, not knowing in advance what's going to happen. And that's why that's still scary to me. Like I'm like very analytical. Like I want to know what's going to happen. But you know, you're never going to know.
Yeah.
And so that's why starting on the side, like starting low risk, starting small, is, you know, more appealing to me. Mm-hmm. So that's probably like one of the big, you know, overarching themes. A couple of the other things that have stood out was Ryan Finley. He's in episode 72 talking about how he makes a full-time living just buying and selling stuff on Craigslist, and mostly appliances. It's like you think of something more unwieldy to like move around, and like he's got a garage full of these things.
Wow.
But like, you know, and supports his family doing this. And so he said the best opportunities aren't visible until you're already in motion. And that one really stood out to me. It kind of sounded, you know, a little hippy dippy at the time, but, you know, that episode was 3 years ago. I've like really found that to be true, where it's, you know, once you kind of start to kind of like, I can kind of parallel that with another guest's advice, Julie Sharon-Osher. She said, you know, your first move in entrepreneurship is kind of like a game of chess, and maybe chess players will be like, this is horrible advice. It's like, you're gonna move a pawn.
Right.
That's your first move.
Right.
You're gonna move a pawn out into the world. You're gonna see what kind of reaction it gets, and then you adjust, right? And so similarly with Ryan's advice is like, hey, you know, I'm gonna try something out, and maybe who knows where that leads. You know, the conversations that I have, like maybe I discover this other interesting website that I can pivot over here, mm-hmm. or maybe I'm gonna learn, you know, this crazy form of advertising on Instagram that like turns to work really well, and I turn that into a productized service or whatever. You know, you never know where it's going to go, but like moving that pawn, you know, that first little move is kind of the first step. So those are a couple bits of advice that came out, and kind of similar to that. Actually, this is a sneak preview. This episode is not even live yet. Said the process is the result, and so I thought that was a really good. Kind of along those same lines of like, you know, the journey is the destination, the process is the result. So you got to learn to love it along the way. You know, it's not like, you know, someday you're going to, you know, wake up and be like, I made it.
Right.
Because, you know, you're always going to be greeted with the same question of like, well,
what next?
Now what, you know?
Yeah.
So the process is the result.
Yeah. No, those are great highlights. And I would completely agree. I think I'm reading a book right now called Learn Anything Fast. And he's like, this is the framework of how to learn things fast, and there's like 10 or 12 points in it, but one of them he's like, it's just super shorten your feedback loop. And I think that's kind of similar to what you're saying of, to figure it out, just start doing it, because you'll realize, oh, that was a bad move, maybe I'll adjust, or, you know, now that I'm in the middle of it, other things pop up as far as opportunities and everything. And that's definitely something that I'm similar to you. Like, I'm always super nervous about things that I'm about to do in business, but I just try to like keep training myself, like, oh, I'll figure it out. I figured out the last one. I'll either learn a lot and make no money, or if I'm lucky, I'll make some money and then have.
But you can get something out the door lean, and you can validate it in a hurry. Like, I've met people who are like, hey, you know, I got $30,000 into this website, and I'm like, well, you know, what does it do? Like, it's a blog. You know, it's like, you could have done this for $20.
Yeah.
And it was just. It's crazy. Or it's like, oh, I haven't talked to any potential customers. I need to make a logo. I need to get my business cards. And it's like, well, yeah, if that's going to give you the confidence to have that conversation, okay. Mm-hmm. But like, understand, like, you might think you're moving forward, but you might be procrastinating. Like, that might be a form of, like,
So,
doing the unimportant things that seem important. I don't know. It's like it's frustrating for me to kind of see people like kind of kicking the can down the road and like avoiding the hard part.
right. No, that's great advice. And I didn't realize that you started virtual assistant like right when we met, apparently, because you've been a partner, for our Copywriter Today product since 2014, I think, which is when I started that. And when you mentioned like getting a lean version out there, I always tell people like I have some screenshots of what the site looked like, and I'm surprised you partnered with me because it was horrible, and it was just a Wufoo form. It literally was just like a password protected page with a Wufoo form. It took me like an hour to set up.
Well, so you did one better with the password protection thing. So I talked to Russ Perry from Design Pickle,
Oh yeah,
and he's like, "Oh, if people knew the request email, whatever it was at designpickle.com, like, oh, we didn't have any system check in place to make sure that person was a customer or whatever."
free work.
So it was just like the lean,
Yeah.
this lean model.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the VA site actually started in 2011.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it had been running for a few years, but it was pretty ugly itself in the early days. So I'm all about it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that's you get it out there, and if your concept is valuable and actually solves a problem, then people will engage and be like, I like this, but I would change this. I mean, I have tons of feedback from early customers, and they made it what it is, what it is today. But yeah, that's definitely great advice to make it lean and figure out if the market likes it, because I would agree, you're usually avoiding something that you're scared of or that you hate, or whatever that big psychological barrier for you is sometimes why we spend more time or money on something that doesn't even matter.
Yeah. Well, it's for me, like in the painting business, right? I'm like driving around my territory. I'm like, circling the things on the map because, it's pre-smartphone and stuff. And you kind of come to this realization, like, dude, nothing is going to happen until you go knock on that first door. You gotta start go talk to customers. And like, in that case, it was cold calling. And it was like, oh, this is gonna suck, But you just like try and psych yourself up for it. And then, okay, I think the first house, like nobody was home. Like, okay, that wasn't so bad. You go on to the next one, and it's just like, okay, this isn't a life-threatening thing. Like you can learn to deal with the rejection of it. But
Right.
It was, you got to kind of get over that hump and start having those conversations.
Yeah. And that's interesting you mentioned, your first job and when you realize you're an entrepreneur, because I think every successful person that I've interviewed and everybody I've researched or watched, I think started in like cold calling or door to door or doing like really out there sales work. And once you get over that fear, everything else is pretty simple comparatively, I think, because there's nothing like knocking on somebody's door.
Gosh, that sounds even worse today than it did 15, 17 years ago. It sounds crazy intimidating. Even like I'll have VAs like make phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad. Can you call these people and find out what time they open or something? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not like our nature to do things that make us uncomfortable that we're not used to. For one of my 2 short stints of jobs, I worked at a repossession company, and knocking on somebody's door asking for their car is even scarier than just knocking and trying to sell them something. So
yeah, that sounds even worse. It sounds like you're likely to be greeted with a shotgun or something.
Yeah, fortunately I was never shot at, but the people in the company that did happen, which was crazy. And but yeah, so it's like it's good to have those experiences early on because you realize like that it's possible to do the difficult, and then also you work hard enough, you get to the point where you can have somebody else make your calls for you. But yeah, so that's I think that what I've been learning over the course of having some folks on the show and just kind of learning about all the different paths to kind of find success in entrepreneurship, and also that success means something different to everybody. That's something that one of my earlier guests, Aaron Woodman, shared. He's like, success means something different to everybody, and he's like, that's something that really helped me early on, like kind of figure out his path to where he is today, and he does a lot of real estate. The last thing that I wanted to kind of just dive into and talk to you about is you, in my opinion, like I'm connected with thousands of affiliate marketers. It seems like everybody online is doing affiliate marketing, but the way that I've worked with you, you're an affiliate of ours, and and we send folks your way too and everything. I feel like you've always approached that in like a really ethical, like above board, like really true to yourself kind of way. And whereas I've seen a lot of, affiliate marketing gets a bad name sometimes because it's just people pushing stuff that they don't care about. So how did you get to where you are today, or have you always been really selective about what you promote or how you do affiliate offers or how it works? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but a huge part of your business income is affiliate income, right?
Yeah, thank you for that. I do try and do business with integrity. Remember, we had a guy who was like, these two are related. Look at that or something.
I remember
like,
that.
Wait,
that was
because we're both bald. Like,
that's not fair.
Yeah. So on the side hustle site, yeah, it's like the revenue pie is kind of split between sponsorships on the podcast, affiliate offers on the site and through the email list, and then kind of my own side hustle experiments and other affiliate sites and freelancing and self-publishing, kind of stuff that falls under that side hustle umbrella. But yeah, trying to be upfront about it and really kind of modeling Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income and what he's been able to build. And he's found, and I feel like I found this too, like people are going out of their way to click on his affiliate link because of the value that he's brought to the table, because of the help and the service that he's provided, and trying to be above board, trying to be along follow his model, because I think he's obviously tremendously successful with it.
Yeah. No, that's a great. He's definitely a huge player in the space that I've followed for a long time. And you're right, he's definitely all about giving value first. And that I always feel like listening to your podcast or seeing what you post in the Side Hustle Nation Facebook group and following the stuff that I read, I always feel like it's the real you. Like you're really like upfront about what's working, and here's what we're doing. Here's things I like or don't like. You definitely have. And I don't know if it just comes over time or it's been natural for you, but you definitely have like a real, authentic, personal brand in everything you do. It's always you behind the keyboard, or obviously on your podcast that's even more personal. But you definitely have a way of communicating well with people that they feel like you're talking to them, even in your emails. So,
well, thank you for that.
Yeah, with from all the years that you have on with working online now. Has there been any kind of like milestones or points or kind of things that you've followed to kind of learn how to write and communicate that way, or is that something that's always been easy for you? Because you definitely write extremely well and communicate well across all your channels, I feel like.
It's been an evolution. It's been a practice. So, I've probably got 1,000 or more blog posts under my belt. I've probably deleted 700 of them, and it's just, I look back at some of my earlier writing, and it's like this giant, block of text, 8-sentence paragraph. And I look at that now, it's like, I can't read that, it's like, short, like get some white space on the page. So like, I think it's part of it is a practice. Mm-hmm. And part of it, especially on the podcast, is like, don't go listen to the first 50 episodes. It's like, those are awful. Like they're embarrassing. And actually, so this is from Joel Saul Seahigh. He hosts Stacking Benjamins. He's like, I want to be, and I think he's quoting Roman Mars from 99% Invisible. He's like, I'm embarrassed by the work I did a year ago, and a year from now, I hope I'm embarrassed by the work I do today. And so trying to get better every week, and hopefully, over a year, that kind of starts to compound.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's definitely good advice. And like we chatted about earlier, the process is what gets you there if you're committed to the process. And one thing that I'm trying to look forward to in 2018 for myself is not just the big overarching goals, because I always lay those out at the end of the year, but like I've taken even more time this year to break it down to what does that mean on a weekly basis, a daily basis, and even like to the hourly level. If I'm serious about something, how do I keep putting little iterations into every day and every hour to improve? So,
all right, what's on the plate? What's a big picture goal for next year?
My goal is to double my revenue next year. So that's
all right.
So that's my big number one. And what usually happens with me in goals is that when I map out the goal, then I realize all these pieces that I don't have in order to get there. And so I'll finalize kind of my full plan before January 1st. So that's always my big kickoff day, but it's actually making me relook at existing business processes and who's on my team and do I have the right leadership and management in place. And it's definitely like, It stresses me out a little bit, to be honest. It's like when I really set something huge, then I'm like, oh my gosh, if I'm going to do that, then what does that mean? And so it makes me, it really forces me to think at a different level, which is probably the benefit of goals. So
Yeah, absolutely.
so,
No, that's cool though.
Yeah. How about you? Anything brewing around yet? We still got a couple of weeks to set it in for 2018.
Yeah, I've been horrible. I haven't done goals for the last couple years, and I've probably suffered because of that. Trying to do more quarterly project-based stuff, or at least that's what I said I was going to do, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside. Maybe the near-term goal is to like get out of like treading water mode. I feel like I'm just constantly on the content hamster wheel of like, oh, another Thursday's coming up. You got to get the next episode out.
Yeah.
And it's been tough to build a big enough backlog where it's like, okay, now I've got some breathing room. Now I can carve out some time to, write the next book or work on the next project or build, whatever it is. And I don't know what it's going to be. And it's probably like there's some mental bandwidth that could be freed up too by thinking about that stuff. So we'll percolate on some gold. Normally we have a big drive. Normally we have like a 13, 14-hour drive back up to Seattle for Christmas, but we're flying this year. So normally that's like my goal setting time, thinking time. But now it's like, just a 2-hour flight wrestling a toddler. So
nice. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on today, Nick. This is really valuable and helpful. And if people want to connect with you and check out what you're doing, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
SideHustleNation.com is the home base. Of course, we'd love to have you tune in to the Side Hustle Show, available on iTunes and wherever fine podcasts are sold. I guess they're sold for free on Stitcher and
Everywhere
Google
else.
Play and all that other stuff. But yeah, thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thanks so much, Nick. We'll have you on again soon.
Sweet.
You've been listening to Today's Business Leaders with Gabe Arnold. Remember to subscribe on iTunes. For more information, visit todaysbusinessleaders.com.